But when you get into this transaction up front, the $100,000 loan that's financing the transaction, the interest rate on that loan is 1.2%.
Yeah.
How is that determined as being an arm's length rate of interest?
Okay, the law said it has to be over the, how do you call it?
Prescribed rate.
Yeah, it's 1%. So 1.1 is good enough, but not less than 1%.
So then when you do
The 1.2 is exactly what
Right,
what you
right.
saw.
It's the bank rate, whatever the overnight bank rate is
Yeah.
prescribed.
You're dealing with tax law too, right? So you have to be greater than the prescribed rate of the CRA. which is
Yeah.
1%.
And for the franchisor, if we say it's
But doesn't the
1.7%,
prescribed rate change every quarter? So doesn't the CRA come
That
back?
hasn't for a long
Hasn't
time.
for
It has
years.
actually changed last year and then went back down 1%. So at a certain point
The
last year.
federal rate, it's
federal-
put at 1% for
Probably once the contract signed, it probably would be.
yeah, exactly.
Grandfathered.
Somebody's monitoring that presumably to make sure. that
Yeah, for
it's
sure,
outside of
for sure.
whatever.
That's set by the Bank of Canada.
And then on the allocation, so the 100,000, 7,000 goes to the franchise, 93 to the software. How is that allocation determined? Like why are we allocating 93 to software and then taking the big damage out of that?
Because we decided.
But is that reasonable?
Yeah,
Who
because
determines if that's a sensible
it's the
allocation when you're
It's
buying?
part,
that?
it's part of the architecture because we decided that the 7.
Sorry, Claude, if I can just interject.
Yeah.
I think that the best way to answer that question, which is a really good question, the best way to answer it is to explain what the judge said in the Prospector case when the franchises were being sold for $240,000, not $100,000. I think if you explain what the judge's rationale was in making the decision as to valuation, because it's really a valuation question.
Yeah,
Good question.
you know, for the evaluation, just first of all about the 7 and the 93, it's just a question that we did the value when we did our homework, that the value of the software was over $90,000.
So it's
The
a question of
difference
fact
between
then.
7, 10,000, or, you know, we decided that it was 7,000 and 93,000.
Right.
But about the value, what the judge said, he said that I don't need an expert. I don't need the CRA to tell me what is the value. If they have hundreds of investors who are doing a transaction with, for example, a franchisor, and all of them are independent, and they decided that it was $100,000. He said, for me, it's the fair market value. And you know, it's not just our judgment to say that. I saw 7 or 8 other judgments the last 6 years who said the same thing. Because many times the CRA said, oh, it's not the real value. The judge said, you can't take the places of 2 businessmen a few years ago that decided that the pricing, the value was $100,000. Who you are to say that it was not? If they can prove that it was not a real product, a real business, it's different. And it's not the same thing. But like what we are, it's not a question. And the nice thing with the judgment is the fact that the judge gave us precedent in different ways. Just another example. The Crown, the CRA said, and I explained just before the presentation, said, if you're a doctor, you work 6 days a week, for sure you have no time to manage your business, so it's not a real business. So the judge said, look, if you hired a real manager, it will be the same thing as if you manage by yourself. But you have to be concerned by your business, so you have to read the update that your manager will send you once in a while. And if you can be available, if they have an annual meeting, you have to try to be there. And it's good enough to say that it's a real implication. And same thing for the motivation. The the judge wrote, and it was funny because he wrote, if you buy a transaction, a project, for the tax impact first, and you believe that you can make money, it's good enough. It's not a problem. So they gave us 11 different precedents like that. That's just amazing.
So my last question is on the exit strategy.
Yeah.
I think one of the things you said was, you know, you can hope that we get bought out by Google or whoever it is,
Yeah.
but there may be a situation where the franchisor is saying, or the Educommand, whoever it is you're gonna essentially exchange your franchise interest for 126,000 shares of this company, valued at $1 a share, which represents
Yeah.
what you put into the transaction. So if you're using Section 85, my understanding was always that that transaction has to occur at fair market value.
Yep.
Which, how do we know today that 3 years from now, the fair market value of those shares is $126,000?
It's, again, two things. We have to take, okay, an hypothesis for the future. But who will determine the value? It will be all the franchisees again, and the franchisor. If all the franchisees and the franchisor will decide it's 126,000, it's the same thing as I just discussed.
But if you know that up front, what I'm getting at is, it
No, it's
raises
just,
the question of
as I
whether
said
the
when I
parties are dealing
present, I
with-
said that it's the vision, is the goal of the transaction.
Right, I get that.
No, for
I
sure.
get that, and I see the
But
legitimate
you know-
business aspect of it. I'm just saying that it raises the question of whether the parties are dealing at arm's length, which is a factual
Yeah.
determination, which is what the risk with this transaction.
You have the
No.
option to sell your franchise or not to
So
sell
he's
it.
saying other premise though, fair date, right?
Yeah. And you know, when we talk in 3 years, they have a special reason that I said 3 years. First of all, if you want to use your exoneration, you have to own your business for minimum 2 years plus 1 day. If we wait 7, 8 years, maybe the value would be too high to do this transaction for the franchisor, or maybe the value would be too low. But in 3 years, 4 years, the value will be just amazing again, because we're in a process to improve our value. You have to understand that in the judgment, the judge said, because we had an expert who gave a report, and the judge said, this type of business, we're talking about software business, the average, it took 7 years before we start to make money. So in 3 years, we have no revenue. Anyway, if you look their financial projection, in 3 years you will have 0 revenue. And the meaning is not that we won't have a real value. The value would be with the tools that we have, would be with the number of users that we'll have. We don't need 1 million users. If we have 1 million users in 3 years, it's not a question. But we're sure that we'll have a few 100,000 users in 3 years. Maybe not 1 million. If we have, it's good. But to do this transaction, the minimum, I would say, of this transaction, we don't need to reach the maximum. We have to reach, a good number of users, and we have to improve